The server room hummed with the steady rhythm of cooling fans and blinking lights. I sat cross-legged on the floor, my laptop balanced on my knees, running diagnostics on the network infrastructure that kept Harrison Financial Group operational. This was my corner of the building. The basement. The place where cables snaked across ceiling tiles and backup generators sat waiting for emergencies that rarely came. My family called it playing with computers. I called it maintaining the digital backbone of a $2.3 billion investment firm. Through the thin walls, I could hear footsteps overhead. The executive offices were directly above me. My father's corner office, my brother David's VP suite, my sister Catherine's strategy department. They spent their days in glass-walled conference rooms, managing portfolios and courting clients and making the kind of decisions that appeared in financial journals. I spent mine making sure their computers actually worked. Emma. David's voice crackled through the intercom system I'd installed last year. Emma, you down there? I pressed the response button. Yeah. Dad's computer is frozen again. Can you come fix it? I'm in the middle of a system update. Can it wait 20 minutes? No. He's got a client call in 10. Get up here. The intercom clicked off. I saved my work, closed my laptop and headed for the stairs. 5 flights up. The elevators were being serviced naturally because nothing in this building worked correctly unless I personally maintained it. Dad's office was exactly as I remembered from childhood. Dark wood, leather furniture, framed photographs of himself with various politicians and business leaders. He was on his phone when I entered, gesturing impatiently at his computer. I walked around his desk and looked at the screen. Not frozen. Just displaying an error message because he'd tried to open a document that required software he'd uninstalled last month despite my warnings. I fixed it in 40 seconds. All set, I said. He nodded without looking at me, still focused on his phone conversation. I let myself out. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Catherine. Oh good, you're here, she said, thrusting her tablet at me. This thing isn't syncing with my email. I've got a presentation in an hour. I took the tablet. The problem was immediately obvious. She'd disabled Cloud Sync in her settings, probably while trying to save battery life. Fixed, I said, handing it back 30 seconds later. Finally. I've been dealing with this for 2 days. She was already walking away, typing rapidly. Oh, and Emma? The shareholders' meeting is tomorrow at 2. Don't schedule any maintenance during that time. We need everything working perfectly. I know. I sent the reminder last week. Good. And maybe dress a little nicer tomorrow? We're having some important people in the building. She disappeared around the corner before I could respond. I stood in the empty hallway holding my laptop, wearing the jeans and company polo shirt that constituted my work uniform. The shareholders' meeting. Right. The meeting where my family would present their annual performance review to the board and discuss their grand plans for expansion. The meeting where they'd showcase their expertise and vision and business acumen. The meeting where they'd decide how to spend money that didn't actually belong to them. What they didn't know, what nobody knew except my attorney and my private wealth manager, was that I owned 73% of Harrison Financial Group's assets. Not the company itself. The assets. My grandfather, Thomas Harrison, had been a brilliant man and a terrible father. He'd built Harrison Financial Group from nothing, turning it into one of the most respected investment firms in the country. He'd also been controlling, manipulative, and convinced that his children were too incompetent to manage real wealth. So he'd done something unusual. When he died 6 years ago, he left the company structure to his children. My father and my Aunt Rebecca, who'd retired to Monaco and never returned. They got the business, the brand, the client relationships, the office building. But the actual investment portfolio, the $500 million in assets that the company managed, he left to me. All of it. There was a letter, of course. My grandfather had been fond of letters. This one was delivered by his attorney on my 23rd birthday, 3 years after his death. Emma, it began, if you're reading this, you're now the legal owner of the Harrison portfolio. Your father will have spent the last 3 years believing he controls these assets. He does not. He never has. The company manages the portfolio on your behalf, but you are the sole owner. You may choose to keep this arrangement private, or you may choose to reveal it. The decision is yours. I trust you'll know when the time is right. Your father is a competent manager but a poor owner. Your brother is ambitious but reckless. Your sister is intelligent but impatient. You, however, have what they lack. You understand that true power comes from understanding how systems work, not just how they appear to work. The company needs someone who sees the machinery behind the curtain. I believe that person is you. For 3 years I'd kept the secret. For 3 years I'd watched my family run Harrison Financial Group, believing they owned what they managed. For 3 years I'd fixed their computers and maintained their systems and stayed invisible in the server room. And for 3 years I'd been quietly learning everything there was to know about the portfolio I actually owned. I had access to everything, of course. Not because of my ownership, nobody knew about that, but because I was the IT administrator. Every email, every document, every financial projection passed through systems I maintained. I had legitimate access to every database, every backup, every archived communication. I knew about David's risky investments in the cryptocurrency sector that he'd hidden from the board. I knew about Catherine's plans to expand into markets she didn't fully understand. I knew about Dad's increasingly desperate attempts to match the returns my grandfather had generated, even as he made decisions that slowly eroded the portfolio's stability. I knew everything. And tomorrow at the shareholders' meeting, they were going to propose a major restructuring that would fundamentally change how the portfolio was managed. They were going to vote on transferring $200 million into a new high-risk investment fund that David had designed. They were going to need my approval. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. to run final system checks before the meeting. Everything needed to be perfect. Presentation equipment, video conferencing for remote board members, network connectivity for the financial data they'd be displaying. I was in the main conference room testing the projector when David walked in at 7:30. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Making sure your presentation doesn't crash in the middle of your big moment." "Right. Good." He set his coffee down and opened his laptop. "Hey, while you're here, can you look at something? My financial modeling software keeps giving me error messages." I walked over. The problem was obvious. He'd corrupted a spreadsheet by forcing a formula that the software wasn't designed to handle. "You're trying to project 20-year returns on a fund that's only existed for 6 months, I said. "The software doesn't have enough historical data to generate reliable projections." "Can you make it work anyway?" "I can make it stop showing error messages. I can't make the projections accurate. Just make the errors go away. The board doesn't need to know the limitations." I stared at him. "You're presenting unreliable data to the board?" "I'm presenting a vision," he said. "Sometimes you have to extrapolate beyond what the data strictly supports. That's called innovation, Emma. You wouldn't understand." I fixed his error messages without another word. By 2 p.m. the conference room was full. 12 board members, including several external advisors. My father at the head of the table. David to his right, looking confident in an expensive suit. Catherine to his left, reviewing her notes. And me in the back corner, sitting at the small table where the AV equipment was set up. Just in case anything went wrong with the technology. That's where the IT person sat. In the corner. Ready to fix things. Nobody questioned it. The meeting began with Dad's overview of the company's performance. Strong returns in most sectors. Some volatility in emerging markets. Overall trajectory positive but room for improvement. Then David stood up for his presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone who'd practiced this speech extensively. "Harrison Financial Group has been successful by being conservative. By playing it safe. But the market is changing. Our clients are younger, more risk-tolerant, more interested in innovative investment strategies." He clicked through slides showing various market trends and potential opportunities. "That's why I'm proposing the Harrison Innovation Fund. A $200 million portfolio focused on high-growth technology sectors, cryptocurrency integration and emerging market opportunities. The projected returns," he clicked to a slide showing the numbers I'd fixed that morning, "are exceptional. 20-year projections show potential returns of 300% or more." Several board members leaned forward, interested. Catherine presented next, outlining the operational structure for the new fund. Management fees. Client acquisition strategies. Marketing plans. It all sounded very professional. It all depended on money they didn't actually control. "Before we vote," said Richard Chin, one of the external board members, I'd like to understand the risk profile better. This is a significant portion of our managed assets. What's our downside protection? The diversification strategy, David began, is insufficient for this level of risk, I said quietly from my corner. Everyone turned to look at me. Sorry, I said, not feeling sorry at all. But the diversification model you're presenting doesn't account for correlation between the crypto markets and the tech sector. If both decline simultaneously, which happened twice in the last 5 years, you're looking at potential losses of 40 to 60%, not the 15% maximum you've projected. David's face reddened. Emma, this is a board meeting, not a tech support session. I'm aware. Then maybe you should go fix computers where you belong and leave financial strategy to people who understand it. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I understand it fine, I said. Your model is flawed. The 20-year projections are based on 6 months of data extrapolated beyond statistical reliability. And the risk calculations ignore correlation factors that any first-year analyst would catch. That's enough, Dad said, his voice sharp. Emma, if you can't be respectful during board proceedings. She's right, Richard Chin said quietly. He was looking at his own tablet, reviewing the presentation materials. These projections are questionable. Where did this data come from? Our internal analysis team, David said quickly. Which consists of David and 2 analysts he hired last quarter, I added. Neither of whom have experience with cryptocurrency markets. Emma, I'm warning you, David said. His confident presentation voice was gone, replaced by barely controlled anger. Leave. Now. I don't think she should, said another board member, Maria Santos. She was looking at me with new attention. She's raising valid concerns. I'd like to hear more. She's IT support, Catherine said. She fixes computers. She doesn't have the expertise to evaluate investment strategies. Actually, I said, I have a master's degree in financial engineering from MIT. I completed it while working here. Took night classes for 4 years. Silence. You never mentioned that, Dad said. You never asked. You assumed I was just good with computers. But you work in the server room, David said. Why would you get a master's in finance if you wanted to work IT? I never said I wanted to work IT. You needed someone to maintain your systems. I was available. It seemed useful to understand the technical infrastructure of financial services. This is all very interesting, David said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But it doesn't change the fact that you're not a voting member of this board. So while we appreciate your concerns, this is a decision for the actual stakeholders. About that, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. A man in his 60s stood in the entrance, carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. James Morrison, senior partner at Morrison & Associates, the law firm that had represented my grandfather. Mr. Morrison, Dad said, standing. We weren't expecting you. Is this about the quarterly legal review? No, Mr. Harrison. I'm here because this board is about to vote on a transfer of assets that requires authorization from the portfolio's legal owner. I'm the owner, Dad said. I founded this company with my father. I've managed these assets for 30 years. You've managed them, Morrison agreed. But you don't own them. He walked to the table and set down his briefcase. From it he removed a document and placed it in front of my father. This is a copy of Thomas Harrison's Asset Allocation Trust, established 18 years ago and executed upon his death. It transferred ownership of the Harrison Financial Group's entire investment portfolio to his granddaughter, Emma Harrison, effective on her 23rd birthday. The room exploded. David was shouting something about impossible. Catherine had gone completely pale. Dad was staring at the document like it was written in hieroglyphics. That's insane, David finally managed. Dad left the company to us. To his children. There was a will. He left the company structure to his children, Morrison said calmly. The business entity. The brand. The client relationships. But the assets themselves. The $500 million investment portfolio that the company manages. Those belong to Emma. This can't be legal, Catherine said. Her voice was shaking. We've been managing those assets for 6 years. We've made decisions, executed trades, allocated resources. With Emma's implicit authorization, Morrison said. The trust agreement allows the company to manage the portfolio provided the management serves the owner's interests. Emma has allowed you to continue that management. But any major restructuring, such as transferring $200 million into a new investment vehicle, requires her explicit approval. Dad finally spoke. His voice sounded hollow. Emma, did you know about this? Yes. For how long? 3 years. 3 years. He repeated it like he was testing the words. You've known for 3 years that you owned, that you controlled. Everything, I said. I've controlled everything. David slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. You've been lying to us. I've never lied, I said. I've just never corrected your assumptions. You've been spying on us. You've had access to all our systems, all our communications. That's my job. I'm the IT administrator. I'm supposed to have access to everything. But you used that access to learn about the assets I own, I finished. To understand how my portfolio was being managed. To make informed decisions about my investments. Your investments, Catherine said. The words came out bitter. You've been sitting in the server room fixing computers while we've been building this company, and you're claiming it's all yours? Not the company, I said. The assets. The portfolio. The $500 million that you've been managing, and in some cases mismanaging, for the last 6 years. Mismanaging. David's voice rose. We've delivered consistent returns. We've grown the portfolio. You've grown at 4.2% annually, I said. The market average for similar portfolios is 7.3%. You've underperformed by 3.1% per year, which translates to approximately $47 million in lost potential returns over 6 years. More silence. Richard Chin was looking at his tablet again. She's right. I've been reviewing the performance data. The returns are good in absolute terms but mediocre relative to market benchmarks. And now, I continued, you want to transfer 40% of my assets into a high-risk fund based on flawed projections and insufficient risk analysis. A fund that, based on my own modeling, has a 63% probability of losing money over the next 3 years. Your modeling, David sneered. You're not a fund manager. You're tech support. I'm the owner, I said. And I'm rejecting this proposal. You can't just. Yes, she can, Morrison said. The trust agreement is explicit. Major restructuring requires the owner's approval. Emma is the owner. She's declining to approve the restructuring. Dad was still staring at the trust document. Thomas did this. My father did this. He left the company to me but gave the assets to Emma. He wanted someone who understood systems, I said. Not just financial systems. All systems. How things actually work, not just how they appear to work. And you've been studying us, Catherine said slowly. Understanding was dawning on her face. For 3 years. Learning everything. Watching every decision we made. Yes. While pretending to be just the IT person. I am the IT person. I'm also the owner. I'm both. David stood up abruptly. This is insane. We're being held hostage by the person who owns the portfolio you're trying to restructure, Morrison finished. Yes, Mr. Harrison. That's exactly what's happening. I won't accept this, David said. I'll challenge the trust. I'll take this to court. You'll lose, Morrison said simply. Thomas Harrison had this trust reviewed by 4 separate law firms. Every possible challenge was anticipated and addressed. The trust is ironclad. Then we'll vote to terminate Emma as owner somehow. You can't vote to terminate ownership, Richard Chin said. He was reading through the trust document now, his expression grave. Ownership isn't determined by votes. It's determined by legal title. And according to this, Emma has clear legal title to the portfolio. Maria Santos cleared her throat. I think we need to take a step back. Emma, you've been managing the company's IT infrastructure for 3 years while also monitoring your portfolio. What are your intentions now? Do you plan to continue the current management arrangement, or are you planning to make changes? Everyone looked at me. I closed my laptop slowly and stood up. I plan to make significant changes, I said. Starting with a complete audit of all investment decisions made in the last 6 years. I want to understand exactly how my assets have been deployed, what returns have been generated, and where we've underperformed. That will take months, Catherine said. Then it takes months. The audit begins next week. I've already hired an external firm. You've already, Dad's voice cracked. You've been planning this. I've been preparing for the possibility that I'd need to take a more active role. Today's proposal made that possibility a certainty. What about the innovation fund? David asked. You're just killing it completely? I'm rejecting the proposal as presented. If you want to redesign it with proper risk modeling, realistic projections, and adequate downside protection, I'll consider a revised proposal. Consider, David repeated. You'll consider our proposal. For managing money we've been managing successfully for 6 years. Mediocrely, I corrected. You've been managing it mediocrely. And now you know why I'm not comfortable with you transferring 40% of my assets into a fund based on flawed analysis. Richardson was nodding. Emma, I'd like to discuss your audit plans in more detail. If we're going to do this, we should do it properly. Agreed. I'll have my team send you the preliminary framework. Your team, Catherine said. You have a team. I've been building one for 2 years. Financial analysts, risk assessment specialists, portfolio managers. All working independently, preparing for the possibility that I'd need to take direct control. You've been building a shadow organization, Dad said. His voice was flat. Planning to replace us. Planning to support you. Or replace you. Depending on whether you were managing my assets competently. I looked at David. Today's proposal answered that question. Morrison checked his watch. I have another appointment. Emma, do you need anything else from me today? No. Thank you for coming. He nodded and left. The room felt very quiet after he was gone. Finally, Maria Santos spoke. I move that we table the Innovation Fund proposal pending redesign and additional risk analysis. All in favor? 7 hands went up. Motion passes. This meeting is adjourned. People started gathering their materials. Several board members were already pulling out phones, presumably to report this development to their own firms and clients. Catherine stopped next to my chair. Emma. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I should have asked. About your degree, about what you were working on. I just assumed. That I was just good with computers. I know. Everyone did. She left. David didn't say anything. He just grabbed his laptop and stormed out, his face red with humiliation and rage. Eventually, only Dad and I remained in the conference room. He was still sitting at the head of the table, the trust document in front of him. Your grandfather always said you were like him, he said finally. Quiet, observant, patient. I thought he meant you were introverted. I didn't realize he meant you were strategic. He taught me to wait for the right moment. And this was it. Humiliating your brother in front of the board. This was stopping my brother from gambling with $200 million of my money based on faulty analysis. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then, what happens now? Now we work together to properly manage the portfolio. Or we don't work together and I hire new management. That's up to you. You'd fire your own family. I'd fire poor managers. Family or not. He stood slowly, looking older than he had that morning. I built this company. Your grandfather and I built it together. You built the company structure. The client relationships. The reputation. Those things have value and they're yours. But the assets you've been managing belong to me. They always have. Because my father didn't trust me to own them. I didn't answer. We both knew it was true. He left without another word. I sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, listening to the building settle around me. The hum of HVAC systems. The distant sound of phones ringing. The normal sounds of a business day continuing. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard Chin. Impressive. Let's schedule a meeting next week to discuss the audit framework. I think you'll find you have more allies on this board than you expected. Another text from Maria Santos. That took courage. Your grandfather would be proud. And finally, one from my private wealth manager. Just saw the news. Ready to move forward when you are. I gathered my laptop and headed back down to the server room. There was work to do. System updates, security patches, the normal maintenance that kept everything running. Tomorrow I'd move upstairs to a proper office. Tomorrow I'd start the audit. Tomorrow I'd begin the process of actually managing my assets instead of just monitoring them. But tonight I had one more night in the server room. One more night of being just the IT person. One more night before everything changed. The next morning I arrived at the office to find a note taped to the server room door. Emma, please come to the executive floor. We've prepared an office for you. Jennifer, HR. I climbed the 5 flights of stairs and found Jennifer waiting in the hallway. We've converted the corner office on this floor, she said nervously. It has windows, proper furniture, everything you should need. Mr. Chen called this morning and said you'd be taking a more active role in management. Thank you, Jennifer. Also, David and Catherine submitted their resignations last night. I stopped walking. Both of them. Yes. David's was brief. Catherine's was more detailed. She said she couldn't work for her younger sister. That it would be too uncomfortable. I see. Your father hasn't resigned. He came in this morning and asked that you meet with him when you have time. The corner office was exactly as Jennifer described. Large windows overlooking the city. A mahogany desk. Leather chairs. Everything that was supposed to signify power and authority. I set my laptop down on the desk and looked around. This was what winning looked like, apparently. It felt emptier than I'd expected. My phone rang. Dad's extension. Emma, he said when I answered. Can you come to my office? I found him sitting at his desk looking at a photograph on the wall. It showed him and my grandfather, both younger, standing in front of the original Harrison Financial Group office. A small storefront that had grown into the building we now occupied. David and Catherine quit, he said without preamble. I heard. They're humiliated. Agree. David's talking to lawyers about challenging the trust, though I told him it's pointless. Morrison was right. It's ironclad. I know. He turned to face me. I've spent 30 years building this company. Teaching your brother and sister how to manage money, how to court clients, how to build relationships in this industry. And it turns out none of it mattered because the assets were never mine to begin with. The company is still yours, I said. The infrastructure, the client relationships, the brand, that's all you. What you built with Grandpa. That has tremendous value. Value that depends on the assets you control. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, your grandfather was right about me. I'm a good manager but a poor owner. I'm too cautious when I should be bold and too bold when I should be cautious. I let David push me into proposals I should have questioned. I let Catherine's confidence override my concerns. You've kept the company stable for 6 years. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Not for someone who owns $500 million in assets. He looked at me directly. What do you need from me, Emma? Do you want me to stay? To resign? To transition to some advisory role? I'd been thinking about this question all night. I want you to do what you do best, I said. Manage client relationships. Maintain the company's reputation. Keep the business running smoothly. But I'm bringing in new people for portfolio management. People who understand modern markets and risk modeling. And David's innovation fund? Debt as proposed. But I'm not opposed to innovation. I'm opposed to recklessness disguised as innovation. What about me? Where do I fit in this new structure? You're CEO of Harrison Financial Group. That doesn't change. But the investment decisions for my portfolio, those go through me now. And through the team I'm building. So I run the company but you control the assets. Yes. He nodded slowly. Your grandfather's plan. Keep the family involved in management but ensure the assets are protected from our mistakes. Something like that. I hate that he was right. Dad's voice carried no heat, just tired resignation. I hate that he saw my weaknesses so clearly that he planned around them even after his death. He loved you. He just didn't trust you with money. Those two statements are more compatible than they should be. He stood and walked to the window looking out at the city. I'll stay, he said finally. If you want me to. I'm good at what I do even if what I do isn't what I thought it was. I want you to stay. And David and Catherine? If they can accept the new structure, they're welcome to return. If they can't, I'll hire replacements. They won't come back. They're too proud. Too angry. He turned to face me. You humiliated them in front of the board. I stopped them from losing $200 million. They humiliated themselves by presenting a proposal they hadn't properly analyzed. That's not how they'll remember it. I know. We stood in silence for a moment. Your grandfather used to say something, Dad said. He'd say that the most powerful person in the room is usually the one everyone underestimates. I never understood what he meant. I thought he was talking about humility or something. He was talking about information asymmetry. Being underestimated means people are careless around you. They reveal things they wouldn't reveal to someone they perceived as threatening. And you've been using that advantage for 3 years. Yes. Sitting in the server room fixing our computers, learning everything. Yes. That's terrifying, Emma. You know that, right? The idea that someone has been watching everything, knowing everything, planning everything. It's genuinely unsettling. I wasn't planning to take over. I was preparing for the possibility that I'd need to intervene. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been running this company for 3 years while pretending you were just tech support. I was tech support. I was also the owner. Both things were true. Dad shook his head slowly. Your grandfather trained you well. Too well, maybe. You're more like him than I ever was. Is that a compliment? I honestly don't know. He returned to his desk, picked up the photograph and looked at it for a long moment. I'll send an email to the staff this afternoon, he said. Announcing organizational changes. Introducing you as an active member of management. People will have questions. Let them ask. And the board. Richard Chin is already on board. Maria Santos too. The others will follow once they see the audit results. You're very confident. I'm very prepared. There's a difference. He almost smiled. Your grandfather's words exactly. I left him there holding the photograph, looking at an image of a past that had been more complicated than anyone realized. The audit took 4 months. In that time I hired 6 new analysts, 2 portfolio managers and a chief risk officer. I moved permanently into the corner office and spent my days reviewing investment strategies, risk models and market projections. I also spent time in the server room. Old habits were hard to break, and besides, the new IT director I hired needed training on our systems. David never came back. I heard through Catherine that he'd taken a position at a competing firm, where he immediately started working on plans to poach Harrison's clients. His innovation fund proposal was rejected there too. Catherine returned after 2 months. She apologized stiffly, said she'd been unprofessional and asked if there was still a place for her. I put her in charge of client relations, where her intelligence and people skills could be useful without giving her control over investment decisions. Dad stayed, managing the company's operations and slowly accepting his new role. We met weekly to review performance and strategy. The meetings were professional and increasingly productive, though they never quite lost their underlying tension. The audit results confirmed what I'd suspected. Mediocre performance, several high-risk positions that weren't properly hedged, and a general tendency toward following market trends rather than anticipating them. We fixed it. Within 6 months, the portfolio was restructured, properly diversified, and generating returns that exceeded market benchmarks for the first time in years. Within a year, the $500 million portfolio had grown to $547 million. People started asking about the transformation. Industry journals wanted interviews. Competitors wanted to know what had changed. The answer was simple. Someone who understood systems had started running them. 1 year after the shareholders' meeting, I was in my office reviewing quarterly results when Dad knocked on my door. Got a minute? He asked. Sure. He sat down across from me, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Just got off the phone with Richard Chin, he said. He wanted me to tell you that the board is unanimously impressed with the portfolio's performance. They're proposing to expand your authority to include oversight of the company's operational investments as well. Not just my personal portfolio? Not just your personal portfolio. They want you managing all of Harrison Financial Group's investments. Company assets, client portfolios, everything. That's a significant expansion. It is. It also means you'd effectively be controlling the entire company, not just your grandfather's assets. How do you feel about that? He considered the question carefully. 6 months ago I would have hated it. Seen it as the final humiliation. Proof that I'd failed at everything my father built. And now I see someone who's doing what needs to be done. Someone who's making the company stronger, more stable, more successful than I ever managed to make it. He paused. Your grandfather saw something in you that I missed. I'm glad he did. Dad. Let me finish. I'm not good at this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry for treating you like you didn't matter. For assuming you'd failed just because you weren't following the path I expected. For not seeing what you were capable of until you forced me to see it. Thank you. Your grandfather would be proud. Hell, I'm proud even if I'm also slightly terrified of you. I smiled. You should be. I know where all the bodies are buried. Because you have access to all our email? Because I have access to everything. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Your brother called me last night. He's struggling at his new firm. Having trouble getting clients to take him seriously. He wanted advice. What did you tell him? I told him to be patient. To learn. To understand that real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. Dad looked back at me. Your grandfather's advice seemed appropriate. After he left, I sat at my desk and looked out at the city. 3 years in the server room. 1 year in the corner office. And finally, everything was exactly where it needed to be. My phone buzzed. A message from the new CIO. Network infrastructure audit complete. Everything's running perfectly. Almost like someone spent years maintaining it properly. I smiled and typed back. Old habits die hard. Then I opened the quarterly reports and got back to work. Because that's what owners do. They understand the systems. They maintain the infrastructure. They wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, they're ready.